Congratulations to the Red Roses, who completed their Grand Slam in front of a record-breaking 59,000 people at Twickenham on the weekend. Today, we'll be reviewing the Champions Cup semi-finals and the structure of Irish rugby, however, with former British and Irish Lion tourist and Ireland back rower Stephen Ferris. It was a historic weekend for the Red Roses, and before we get into Champions Cup action, a huge congratulations should go out to the Red Roses for clinching the Grand Slam in a 38-33 win at Twickenham in front of nearly 59,000 people, which is a world record attendance for a standalone women's game. Champions Cup semis have happened. Leinster are now set to take on La Rochelle in 3 weeks in Dublin in a repeat of last year's final. Our special guest today joins us to review the semis. Stephen Ferris, are you going to be in Dublin for that final in 3 weeks' time?
I definitely would have if Ulster had made it there, but I'm not sure. I think I might actually, unless I'm doing a bit of work for Heineken or something like that, I'll just be chilling out on the sofa watching it, like many others. But yeah, it should be a great occasion. I suppose a lot of the Leinster fans and I suppose the players as well had sort of targeted that home kind of run in with the last 16 quarterfinal, semi-final, and obviously the final. So yeah, it's. I heard of some of the Leinster players talking after the weekend saying, I think it was Josh van der Fleer saying that's the loudest he's ever heard the stadium. And the atmosphere was incredible. And for only being 45 or 42,000 or something in the stadium, that's a pretty big statement to make. I know they like to keep their fans on side, but Josh is a straight down the middle kind of character. And yeah, that's good to hear. So no, I'll wait and see if I get a bit of work before heading down to the Aviva Stadium.
Just on that subject, then I was going to bring it up later, but obviously Leinster have ended up effectively with a home semi-final and a home final. You mentioned if the stadium really was that loud, and that's on club or international scales, but what do you make of that? That probably, it's fair to say one of the 2 or 3 best teams in Europe, without doubt, is having that run-in and that advantage, because it is. We saw two home teams effectively win at the weekend. It is an advantage.
Oh yeah, it certainly is, and when you bring Leinster into the Aviva Stadium, they seem to go up another gear as well. Like, I certainly feel if that game had been played in the RDS, it probably wouldn't have been the same game, or Leinster wouldn't have had as a cutthroat edge, a ruthless streak in them, and they seem to have that at the Aviva Stadium, a bit like obviously like Ireland do as well. And we all know that many of the Leinster team are playing consistently for the Irish team, so there is that home away from home sort of feeling amongst I suppose a lot of those Leinster players. So yeah, it's a huge advantage. When he played in the old Ravenhill or Kingspan Stadium, you always backed yourself to get a result, and I suppose Leinster are feeling exactly the same way with the draw that they've obviously gotten.
I'd be interested to know, Stephen, what's the view of Leinster amongst guys like yourself from other provinces? They can't move for internationals. They can't move for a big supply of top-end players out of the school system down around Dublin. Do you take a sort of all-Ireland pride in their achievements? Or are you more like things over here where, Gloucester and Bath, for example, if Bath were playing the Vladimir Putin 15, the King's Own Shed would be screaming for the Russians. Do you take big pride in Leinster's achievements, or do you think you're jammy gits, or you've got far too many advantages, and how the hell do you get away from it? You pay your players too much money? I don't know what your view is.
Well, it's an interesting point that you finished off there with paying your players too much, and that's certainly not the case. I think it was Richard Wigglesworth's comments after the Leicester game sort of maybe got blown out of proportion by the media. And yeah, everybody says, whether you're English, France, Crusaders, whoever you are, oh yeah, let's just copy the Irish blueprint. Let's just copy this Leinster school system. But the thing is, you can't, or many teams and many systems can't, because they don't have the money. These school systems are you've parents that go along and, are wealthy and maybe throw X amount at the school every year just to have a full-time strength conditioning coach, and then like they've all got directors of rugby. And like when I was at school, it was the technology teacher who was running out after the last class to put on a pair of boots and set up a drill for us to get going. Like these guys have their S&C in the morning before they take class. Afterwards they have nutritionists, they have, like, it's a full professional setup, and everybody goes like, these young guys are stepping out of school and representing Leinster. Why? Well, hold on a second. Rewind it here. In school, it's a professional setup. They're all already in a professional setup. So unless you have unlimited amount of money, unlimited amount of good coaches that are going to get paid a half decent amount of money, then it's going to be hard to play catch up. But in terms of the actual players themselves, when they then integrate into Leinster, like, a lot of the Leinster squad are on national contracts, so they're effectively paid by the RFU and not Leinster. So people are talking about, James Lowe re-signing, and we don't know what he's signed for or whatever. But hold on, the RFU actually put Josh van der Fleer on the national contract, so that maybe then freed up a bit of cash for him. And a lot of the other guys below them, I'd say the average salary is absolutely no more than what the average salary would be in a Gloucester or a Bath or a Saracens. Absolutely not. A lot of these young guys that are playing in the URC week in and week out are maybe on between 50 and 100 grand a year. And then you have your top Irish players that are, the big earners. So yeah, it's a blueprint that we're all trying to chase down. And to go back to your original question, I think your original question about, is there envy, or am I like, these lads, how do you chase them down? And part of me feels that this Leinster team are only going to get better, like, which is, as an Ulster man, and seeing your team get to quarterfinals and semi-finals, the odd final here or there, but always come up short, always the bridesmaid, as the slagging is up here. It's hard to take. Like, it is hard to take, and there's been money and time and effort put into the school system up here, but it's going to take decades before we get to the level that it is down in Dublin. So there's a part of me that obviously likes to see these Irish players playing consistently well, and obviously that feeds massively into the national side. But I hate seeing Leinster win every week.
I did a column on this a couple of weeks ago, and I think there's a bit of tall poppy syndrome that goes on. I mean, Leinster have got so much so right, and they're blessed with this school system. And actually, that was there before the modern day Leinster. I saw Leo Cullen in the week was saying, well, nobody was complaining about this in like the noughties when Leinster weren't winning everything. But actually, I mean, that was when I covered Irish rugby, and it was a big issue. Leinster was so underperforming. They had so much in their favour. They had such a great school system. They had these centrally contracted players. They had the huge demographic, and yet they couldn't win. They couldn't win. They kept on losing quarters and semi-finals in Europe. In fact, sometimes they didn't even get through. So the same conditions exist now as then. It's just that they've made them work for them. So I think you have to credit Leinster for somehow tapping into that incredible pyramid and making it work. But they've always had these advantages.
I would probably disagree with you, because I've experienced the Irish side, and from 2004-5 to when I retired, like, we were training at a school called Bray School, scrummaging in grass 12 inches high, covered in mud. Like, now it's the professionalism that has changed. Like, so yes, they had the school system. Yes, they still had plenty of money. They obviously have a lot better coaches in there as well, but the professionalism of the whole thing, like the RFU now have the high performance center. They have 3G pitches all over the place, state of the art gym facilities. Like, we trained in a marquee, like on the back of a hotel, for, like, I want to say a marquee. This thing was 20 meters by 10 meters, like, full of pumped up rugby players looking to get rid of a bit of energy. So you can imagine some of the banter we had in there. So, like, it's changed significantly over the years, and the more professional it's become in Ireland, the bigger impact that's had on the level of performance on the pitch.
I mean, I think that I would argue that's tapping into what was already there. I mean, I can remember going to Blackrock College 20 years ago, and it was world-class facilities, and Newbridge College. So that has always been there. It sounds to me like the IRFU sort of shortchanged you there, Stephen, and put you out in the long grass with the national team. But
yeah, we trained the Blackrock at under 19s and under 21s, but then we stayed in a hotel up the road. It was like 2 stars. You get fed soup and bread every day, like, you know. It was
I know the other thing that rankled with some. I got into a Twitter spat with somebody who said, "Oh, Leinster only occasionally play at the Aviva." Well, I totted it up. They played the last pool match at the Aviva. They played round of 16, 8-4-2-1. They played a big URC match over Christmas. They've got a playoff match there next week. They might have a semi-final there. They play there way more than Ireland play. I mean, it's kind of Leinster. It's almost like Leinster's home ground now. I suspect they almost play as much there as the RDS.
Yeah, and the RDS, as you probably know, wouldn't be the state-of-the-art facility, and we know that there's plans in place to regenerate the whole of the grounds there. But yeah, you know, like if you rock up to the RDS, and then, you know, the next week you rock up to the Aviva, it's a different mindset. This is a national stadium playing in front of 40-50,000. You know, all the TV crews are there. Like, it just, there's so much more significance behind it when you take the pitch at the Aviva than at Kingspan or at RDS or Thomond or you know, down in Galway, the sports ground. So it's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage, and also it's a massive advantage because of the revenue that they, you know, make off the back of selling. What was the cheapest ticket? €75 to go and watch in a semi-final, which for me is absolutely ludicrous. It's ridiculous that, you know, the price of the tickets there for that. And hopefully that's addressed going forward, because, you know, to take a family of 4 and go for a bite of lunch, you're not going to get much change out of €400 or €500.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess that you know, when they get a crowd of almost over 45,000 for the game, they're probably unlikely to change the ticketing prices if they're managing to get the, you know, get the money in. But I'm quite interested by the, you know, by what you say about the professionalism of the schools. I guess I think that where we're, you know, in England, certainly they're beginning to realize that things are falling down a bit, is with the academy system here, because those school academies or school programs that you've got, particularly in Leinster, but I think elsewhere in Ireland as well, are definitely a step up on what's happening with the academies here. You know, we're beginning there's beginning to be a real gap, I think, with young players coming into the Premiership. I don't think that they're there in the same way that the young Irish players are.
I probably agree with you on that, and I think over, like, take out the last 3 years, I think any player that I played with or against that played in the Premiership always told me that the Premiership was the holy grail of club rugby, and that, you know, how tough it was week in and week out, and the amount of games and the amount of quality players, and you know, well, half the players that played in the Pro 14 wouldn't even, you know, make the 23 squad of a Worcester or whoever it may have been, and I think that is starting to change. I'm not sure if it's because of the addition of the South African teams, which has obviously helped the standard of the league no end, and Benetton Rugby, you know, playing a lot better as well. But like, you know more about the school system than me in England, but here in Ireland, like, you've maybe 5 or 6 of former players that represented Ireland, that represented the British and Irish Lions, that are actually directors of rugby in these schools. Like, they've experienced firsthand what it takes to be a professional rugby player. And yes, they're not out on the coaching paddock every day, you know, blowing a whistle, but they're getting paid a nice salary. Somebody like Sean Cronin is now in, I think it's Terranure in the club rugby as well. And you look at the club rugby here in Ireland in Division 1A, which is the highest level, and the teams in it, you know, the majority of those teams, again, from the club side are from Leinster, and there's a couple of Munster in there. And, the Ulster ones are 1B, 2A, 2B, and again, Connacht, 2B, 2C, all the club teams. So Leinster are not only dominating the school side of things, they're also dominating the club rugby side of things as well. So, it's something that's a model that's working really, really well. And the other thing is, like, with the school system, it feels like, yes, there's this rivalry. We know, like, a friend of mine, a guy called Chris Sylvester, his brother is obviously one of the main guys at Saracens. And, he went to Blackrock College, and they were over for the England game, but the Schools Cup final was on, and his old school, Blackrock, was playing in the final against, I can't remember who it was. And, like, he went to the game. There was the Legends game, the Irish Legends game was on the Friday night. He would have rather have went to the Schools game with his Blackrock College tie on and his, all his colours, and he's, pushing on 60. Like, these are people that live and breathe the school religion, the rugby religion, and they love to see their school do well. And, like, he flew in from Bermuda, like, and he wanted to go and see Blackrock College. So it just shows you that, even through the years, the amount of support that the school system gets down in Dublin is massive, and obviously that helps filter into the senior side in Leinster. And how do we all get there? That's the magic question. How does everybody else play the catch up? And because up in Belfast, you've Campbell, Methody, and then Inst, 3 schools that every year you could maybe select 75% of the academy players from.
And are they all private schools, Stephen?
What's that? Sorry?
Are they all private schools? Those,
yeah, correct. Yeah.
And it's obviously private school driven in Dublin.
Certainly is.
I live in Bristol. We've got the same thing here. Gervin Dempsey is in charge of rugby at one of the schools here, just appointed, Colston's, I think.
Colston's.
And Clifton College have Matt Salter, who's a relatively recent Bristol captain, and Danny Grucock running their rugby. You don't get those guys at Bass Street Comprehensive. That ain't going to happen. So the gaps in the educational structure here in terms of pure rugby, absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. There are a couple of state schools in the West Country that take rugby seriously, but that's it. And while the dividends you're getting from that immediately are probably quite high, what that says for rugby as a popular participation sport for young people going forward is another question entirely, because we are seeing so many club games being handed walkovers, people raise aside. There's all sorts of hassles. We've done quite a bit of that stuff in the rugby paper. So I think while it's very, very impressive, and what you say about Leinster, that's an extremely impressive setup, but how sustainable it is for rugby in the wider context, not so sure.
Yeah. Well, the wider context is something, that is the remit of the rugby unions. That is what their remit is. The continuation of the game and the flourishing of the game. And if they're not investing in state schools, you've got to ask why. Why aren't they doing what Australia did with, the AFL did in Australia with Aussie rules, taking the sport in lock, stock and barrel, everything, coaches, working out the fixture lists, doing the coaching, et cetera, putting programs in. That is the only way that this is going to get redressed. Now, these unions at the moment are, you look at the RFU, its financial mismanagement is something else. And so it's got no money to do this, but it has had money to do it in the past, and it ought to be doing it. It ought to have done it, and it certainly ought to be aiming to do it, and very, very quickly. And probably the same. I mean, the IRFU has been extremely well run and is currently financially in, compared to the other nations in the, in the other home nations, is in a very good position financially. So it does have, the wherewithal to be able to put something like that in place.
Stephen, can I ask, and this is more thinking on an international perspective then, and we've spoken about the Leinster-Ireland carryover several times on this podcast. What model do you think benefits the Ireland national team the most? Because everyone's saying, okay, these Leinster players, they know each other so well. In terms of sustainability, do you think that's what's going to keep Ireland being the superpower they are today?
It's a good question, because obviously we work a good bit with Tom Shanklin, and with the debacle of Welsh rugby over the last season or two, he almost thinks that the Welsh Rugby Union should invest much more heavily in one of the regions and make it really competitive, and then use the other one or two or three, however many it may be, to have more of the academy players coming through and trying to get the level up, but obviously over the next 5 to 10 years, not over the next 2. And like, he thinks obviously that would help massively as well when you then step into an international jersey. So that's somebody who I think probably sees Leinster week in and week out winning really well and doing well in all the competitions, and then that filtering through to the national squad. But as an Ulster player and a former Ulster player, and seeing these Leinster players playing week in and week out, if there's a 50-50 call and in the back row position, am I not going to get it because the Leinster players play more consistently with each other? So he's going to get the nod ahead of me. There always used to be this back in the day with Declan Kidney and the Munster players. We always used to hear this coming out of the camp. Oh yeah, when it comes to scrum half, Peter Stringer's always going to get the nod because of the Munster thing. And now it's changed to the Leinster thing. So, and even look at when the last international forward to be capped by Ireland, an Ulster player I'm talking about, was Ian Henderson in 2012. So over a decade for an Ulster forward to get capped by Ireland. I know Tom Stewart might be in the reckoning over the next couple of years. Who knows? We'll wait and see. But there's been no doubt that there'll be another Leinster hooker that comes in and plays really well and gets loads of minutes in the URC, and all of a sudden he might get catapulted straight into the national squad, and then the Tom Stewarts or whoever might be spat back out again and find themselves further and further down the pecking order. So as much as it's really beneficial to Irish rugby, is it beneficial to the other 3 provinces? They would probably argue that it's not. And me personally, I love to see Irish rugby play well. So at the minute, I'm like, yeah, it is a good thing, because it's given us a chance here to win a Rugby World Cup. It's given us a chance here to get through to a semi-final where we've never been before and create a bit of history. But, I don't go to bed at night thinking about how Ulster Rugby can, get a few more players into the Irish setup. I'm like everybody else and think about how Ireland can go win a World Cup. And if that's having more Leinster players in the team, then, that's the way it is at the minute.
I'm really concerned about this idea of constantly narrowing the base. I mean, Tom, I hear what Thomas said, but, remember, that Wales used to have about, 10 very strong club sides with fantastic traditions, and the base got narrowed to 4. And since that sort of pseudo regions built up, the Irish provinces have always been there as rugby entities. This was created, and it's been a disaster. It's been, apart from during the Gatland years where they did actually have that sort of Club Wales thing. But I'm very, very unsure about the shrinking base always being the thing. And there's just one other thing here as well. I think that the reigning European champions are La Rochelle. And I think that they have a pretty good chance of they're going to have to play out of their skins in order to do it. But I think they've certainly in with a chance of winning. I know I said that about Toulouse this last weekend, and they didn't get it right. But there we go.
Can I just add, I was fascinated to hear Stephen's comments there, because I remember covering Ireland throughout the noughties, And there was a period from about 2000, 2003. There's no doubt in my mind that David Humphries was playing better than a young Ronan O'Gara. And I was absolutely gobsmacked that there was all this debate, and eventually Ronan won it. The Munster faction won it. The sort of Dublin press and Munster press won that argument. But I used to come over, I'd be amazed. David would make one mistake in a match and it would be absolutely jumped on. Rog would make 2 or 3 mistakes and we're totally ignored. And it was, as you were saying, you rely too much on that preeminent team. Munster were the team that were doing great in Europe. Peter Stringer was the scrum half. Rog had to be the starting 10. And David Humphries missed out on a lot of caps and starts there. And yes, Rog eventually became a very great player, but I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And as an Englishman diving in, and Mark Sousa used to come over with me, we'd arrive in Dublin and we couldn't believe how strong that sort of media crusade to keep Rog as the starting 10 was. And it's interesting your insight there. That's part of the argument, I think.
There's an important thing we should mention here, that Humphries did pretty well when Warren Gatland was coaching Ireland, but Warren confessed in his autobiography, which I wrote, that he used to help Humphries along by sprinkling holy water on his boots. Now that's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? I don't
even mean that.
I don't want to get too sectarian about this, Stephen, but do you have an immediate reaction to such a terrible, terrible act of, well, I describe it?
Yeah, I get on very well with both Humps and Rog. Rog actually messaged me there a couple of weeks ago. Just had a bit of a yarn via text, and I play a bit of golf with David, so I would see him quite regularly. And I think, like, you could even say, Chris, about not just the David Humphries Ronan O'Gara situation, the Johnny Sexton Ronan O'Gara situation as well, because that sort of didn't change until Declan Kidney left. Yeah. Because even at the 2011 Rugby World Cup, like, it was tit for tat. And of course it was Rog who started against Wales in that quarter final. And everybody thought it should have been Johnny, because Johnny had started 1 or 2 of the other games and played really, really well. But then when it came to the crunch in a quarter final and a big moment, I suppose, like, if I was a coach, you would lean on the person that you think you can rely on in the big moments, and like Decky did that numerous times with Rog, and he never let him down. So like, Humph won 74 caps for Ireland, and I say I had to retire early because I made all his bloody tackles for him at Ulster. But yeah, he was a quality operator, and I loved playing with him. He's such a flair player, like, and at times Ireland seemed to function a lot better with that style of out half, back in the noughties.
Just going back to something earlier you were saying, Stephen, well, the conversation we were having about whether the Leinster superiority feeds well into Ireland rugby. I think what you were suggesting then is, although the Ireland well-oiled machine, which is spoken about so much, is obviously in as good a place as it's ever been as a result of the system that feeds into it, there are probably individuals at the other provinces who, on merit, could be making those match day 23s and aren't. So I don't know, to the English fan who maybe doesn't follow it quite as closely as you do, give a few names that you think would be worthy of inclusion in this already vastly superior Ireland squad.
There's a few people, obviously, as well, that have just been unlucky. So, like, I think somebody like Peter O'Mahony has been, I think, ever since he captained the Lions in the first test and didn't play particularly well, and then sort of lost a little bit of form after that. Everybody's been calling for his head for the last, those 2017, 5-6 years. And there's been so many players that have, had the opportunity to jump into his boots. And then, so the likes of, I think it was Gavin Coombs there 2 years ago, he's playing unbelievable rugby for Munster. Then he got a virus and he got sick. And, like, he was lined up to play in the autumn internationals against the bigger nations, whoever they were back then. And then that didn't happen. And all of a sudden, I think it was maybe Pete man of the match against the All Blacks, and then like, you know, he's straight back in there and has been ever since. And somebody like Pete always, you know, always has big games against the big sides. And he's a good. You'd rather be playing with him than against him, week in and week out. To pull names, let me see.
John Cooney would be one, wouldn't he?
Yeah, like I'm not sure.
Maybe not now, but there was a spell, wasn't there, when he was playing the house down week on week in pretty big matches.
Yeah, but if you take out his goal kicking, you know, like that 90% goal kicking accuracy, is he as good a scrum half as the other couple of lads? I think, you know, somebody like Craig Casey leapfrog maybe 2 or 3 guys just for having a couple of brilliant performances with Munster, but it's maybe not just the way he plays. I think it's actually his personality as well and what he feeds into the national side. I'm just trying to think of a couple of players that maybe could feel hard done by, that just because they play for a different province, you know, that they're left out. Let me see. Stuart McCluskey over the years. Like Stuart McCluskey only had 2 caps to his name until the start of last autumn internationals. Bundy
Jacob Stockdale.
Sorry,
Jacob Stockdale. I mean, he's had injury problems. He's had problems, but he was such a quality player for that 18 months. Do you not back that sort of player like you back Peter O'Mahony, who had you know, a poor match in that test, but you know his quality, so you stick with him. I thought Stockdale was brilliant for 18 months, and I would just back him until he comes back to form.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I obviously watch him every single minute of every single week, and he has really struggled, like massively struggled in the URC. And it's only been the last couple of games that he's managed to get his hands on the ball. I think he scored 2 tries all season as a winger. So like he's struggling to regain that form from 2018. Like props like Buckley, the loose head prop for Conan, like he is an incredible scrummager, brilliant every single week, really durable. But because he's playing for Connacht and not probably getting the results, then he's like just almost forgotten about.
Would Alton Delan have fallen into that category when he was at Connacht?
Yeah.
Because he looked a very good player to me for, you know, I mean, he was an eye-catching player. And you sort of thought at the time, well, if that guy was down in Dublin, and some people have gone to Dublin, I guess maybe for this reason. You know, not all of Leinster are Dublin school produced, are they? People have moved there, but Delan was one of those eye-catching players, I thought, and maybe didn't get the crack he would have done if he'd been playing in Dublin.
Yeah, and again, it's like when I think back about it, it's difficult for me to answer because I was always sort of one of the first names on the team sheet, and like, so I was never really on the periphery, or you know, wasn't really being dropped like that often. So I always felt secure, and I feel like there was maybe only 25 lads that happened with, where you know, I don't think that should ever be the case. And I think that's where maybe we went wrong a bit back then, was that we had, you know, 5 or 6 senior players, myself included, that sat out training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then turned up and played a captain's run, and then played on a Saturday just because we were senior players.
So you took your sofa to training with you, did you?
I was usually in the jacuzzi.
Times are hard. Times are hard.
We're 35 minutes into this episode, and we've done nothing that was on my agenda so far. So I reckon we should tick at least one thing off the list, Stephen, by doing your Random Rugby 15, which is the 15 quickfire question section, if that sounds good with you.
No problem.
Awesome. Let's get going. Nickname.
I have 2. There's a guy called Graham Steadman who was the defence coach for Scotland for a while, Ireland for a while. I think he was at Cardiff as well, rugby league guy. And he nicknamed me Fez. So like all the Irish guys would have called me Fez. And then my younger days at Ulster, it was Horse, a guy called Neil Best, the back rower. I remember smashing Lottie DeKiri in a Autumn International. He started the nickname Horse, and then that stuck with me for a number of years. So yeah, two nicknames. We'll go with
Best rugby memory.
that. Winning Grand Slam 2009.
Most embarrassing rugby memory.
I was having to think about this, Ollie, and I don't really have an embarrassing one. Like I was sitting at the bottom of a rock against Ulster versus Leinster. This isn't really embarrassing, but Leo Cullen was playing, and myself and Neil Best grabbed Leo Cullen in a headlock and asked him what his mum got him for Christmas. It was like we were playing on Boxing Day, and he kept like grabbing him harder and harder and harder. He's going, "What did your mummy get you for Christmas? What did your mummy get you for Christmas? Come on, tell me." And I was just like laughing my leg off, and like Leo Cullen looked quite like embarrassed. So yeah, no embarrassing stories for me really.
Did he answer the question?
I think he did. Yeah, I can't remember what it was.
Leo Cullen, if you're listening, what did your mum get you for Christmas that year?
Box of short socks.
Yeah, classic. Pre-game tune.
Darude Sandstorm.
Nice. Post-game meal.
Pizza.
Best player you've played against.
This changes all the time, but I'm going to go for come back to me on that one.
I will. Best player you've played with.
Paul O'Connell.
Favorite player right now.
Again, it's changing all the time. After seeing La Rochelle the weekend, it changed from the day before. I'm gonna go with, just because he sort of changed the way the back row is played over the last couple of seasons, gonna go with Keelan Doris.
Nice. Who did it change to from the La Rochelle team? Was it Aldrich?
Well, Gregory Aldritz playing class again, because he sort of went through a bit of a 12-month spell there where he hasn't been playing particularly great. I'm not sure if teams are figuring him out, or he's been carrying a bit of an injury, or what it's been, but he hasn't been the same dynamic player, but he played very well again there on Sunday.
Did. Rugby idol.
Jonah Lumu.
Best player you've played against.
Jerome Kano.
Nice.
Yeah.
Who does it change between?
Well, actually Paul O'Connell as well. Obviously played against him with Munster and had some ding-dong battles against Paulie. Just so much respect for Paul. Like, we trained a lot together as well, especially in the gym. Pushed each other on massively. Obviously, he was stronger in some exercises than me, and vice versa. And we always paired up with each other just to drive each other on. And he would have been like not a mentor, but a lot of respect between the both of us. And yeah, even now, like, caught up with him in Rome when I was over for the Six Nations game, stood and had a yarn for half an hour, just chit-chatting and having a bit of crack. And yeah, he's such a pleasant, lovely guy. And then as soon as he crosses the whitewash, he turns into his nickname, Psycho. So he's a good bloke.
Favorite stadium.
Principality.
Favorite gym exercise.
Sofa moving.
Anything upper body. Lower body's absolutely wrecked now. I can barely even do a bodyweight squat. But if it was to pick one, probably just bench, barbell bench.
Occupation if rugby didn't exist.
Probably on a building site somewhere. I did a little bit of manual labouring when I was younger, so probably would have got into some sort of trade. I wish I had it done. I'd probably be earning more money now than I ever would be.
Superstitions.
None.
Rugby law you would change.
I would like to have extra time or like added on time. So like even watching the Liverpool game there against Spurs and seeing the drama in the last 5 or 6 minutes and actually knowing that, you know, when the 80 minutes are up, you might have another 4 to 6 minutes or whatever it may be to try and close out a game. And I think it would actually help with a lot of the slow play that we actually see around scrums and everything else. So have a fourth official or some other guy in the box having a look at beside the TMO and saying, "Oh, there's 5 minutes injury time," and it's just, you know, as a player, you see the clock tick down to 80 minutes, and to have it in the back of your head that you still had a chance with the 80 minutes gone on the clock, but there was an extra 4, 5, or, you know, you get the 5 and there's another long play that could last 2 minutes. I think that would not only be good for the players, but also for the fans, and they attract more people to the sport as well when you have, you know, really close encounters in extra time.
I'm completely with you on that.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Where's the would it still be after the 5 minutes added time, kick the ball out, or would it be like in football, the ref sort of arbitrarily blows his whistle to say full time? Because that could then
I think I think the players would ultimately determine when the game is ends.
Right.
Like, can't get the 85 and then he just blows the whistle and, you know, they're about to score a try. So I think, you know, if the ball goes out of play or there's a knock on, or if a team's in control. And again, I think, you know, way back you should just be able to sandbag, waste 2 minutes and then kick the ball out. You know, that needs to be penalised, and we need to you know, work out ways of making it more exciting come the tail end of the game, where I think specifically rugby union, it almost peters out towards the end of a game. And watching the football especially over this weekend, like, it's been the last 10 minutes of the matches have been class, I mean, really enjoyable. So for me, that's just a way of maybe enhancing the product.
The less you know about the timing, the more you have to keep playing. You have to keep playing. So, yeah. No, I mean, I think that's
the best we've had, isn't it? In about 60. That's a very good belter. That should be introduced next season.
We need
Somebody's been arguing about this for years, Brendan. If only you read what I wrote.
I think actually I do. I do remember you mentioned it once, actually, Chris.
I mean, you're not alone in not reading this rubbish, but I'm just saying.
Lastly, best thing about working in rugby?
It used to be travel. I always used to love jumping on a flight and going traveling, but since then, you know, a couple of years after retired, travel then became a bit of annoying, and I suppose it is annoying for everybody when, you know, COVID and everything else hit, and it just became a pain in the backside. But I think I still get a buzz out of it. People always ask me, "Oh, why do you still, you know, commentate and work in the rugby?" And, like, as I said, I'm able to remember back to specific games and pick bits out of it. And, like, the buzz that it gave me when I played, of course, it doesn't reach the same heights working in it now and covering a lot of the matches. But, you know, when Ulster travelled down to the Aviva Stadium for the last 16 in the Heineken Champions Cup, there was a part of me that felt Ulster could get a result. And that's the way the players felt. And, you know, that's the way they felt in the changing room as well, because I've obviously been there. So, like, I got a bit of a kick out of that and a bit of a buzz out of that. And, you know, sometimes I drive up the road from a game and I get into the house and I'm not able to sleep straight away. And why is that? It's because you've got a little bit of the adrenaline from the match, and you know, you're not able to switch off. And obviously you speak to a lot of rugby players or sportsmen or women that, you know, it's difficult to sleep after, you know, huge games. So yes, it's the buzz of the big occasion that keeps us all in it, eh?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. We'll wrap that up there, and let's actually look at the semi-finals very quickly and what happened, because I did want to do that. So Stephen, you weren't here, but I'm trying to remember our predictions from last week. We all predicted La Rochelle, and then half of us predicted Leinster, half of us predicted Toulouse. Nick, let's start in reverse order. So let's go with La Rochelle. That's pretty much what we all expected, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And you talk about atmospheres in grounds. I mean, the atmosphere in Bordeaux was absolutely, buzzing. It was electric. And La Rochelle had wrapped it up pretty well, by 10 minutes into the second half. I think it was done and dusted, really. I thought that it showed, there was a lot of talk about Bottier before the game and how influential he was. Or has been, and then this guy Budahent comes on, and it's almost a seamless transition. Their big men all stood up, and we saw one or two guys certainly that I didn't really know. The centre Sutani who came through and had a big game. Hastoy, the fly half, appears to be more and more in control, and Kerbalo is always was. When he was playing for the Chiefs in New Zealand, he was always an outstanding scrum half, and really didn't get a look in just because they've got so many of them. But he's some player. So, they're for me they're definitely a significant chance at the Aviva.
Brendan, you like these sorts of questions. Tawira Kerbalo, he scored 2 in the quarters, 2 in the semis, and Austin Healy said he's the best. He either said the best 9 in the world not playing international rugby, or the best player in the world not playing international rugby. I can't remember.
Yeah, he said one of those two, didn't he? I mean, Australian qualified because he was born in Melbourne. Yeah. Could unquestionably get into the Australia squad if Eddie Jones came phone in, and why not? I think he's 5 years out of the All Blacks team. I don't particularly like all the switching, but if the law is there, yes, I would think Eddie Jones would make a call. I mean, I was trying to establish if he's also French qualified, because he's had 5 years residence, but I don't think he can do that because you can't qualify on residence if you've already played for another test team. It can only be if you've got that heritage qualification. But he had a fantastic match, yeah. I was left thinking one thing, though. Good as La Rochelle are, if Mike Adamson had seen the knock-on in the build-up to their winning try against Gloucester, Gloucester would have won that match. So they're not unbeatable by any stretch of imagination, and Gloucester gave us the template as to how to move that pack around, and Leinster would have noticed that. Leinster, with their fluid A game, especially with the quick moving of the ball from forwards to backs, they will know how to take on La Rochelle, especially after last year as well. So I think a lot of homework will be done. And I think you'll see a supercharged Leinster playing a quicker tempo than even they normally play at.
It'll be interesting to see what La Rochelle do on the bench, won't it? I mean, Toulouse, it's rugby and these things happen, but Toulouse really suffered by having a 6-2 split on the bench. You could see why they've done it, because going 80 minutes against a Leinster side playing at the tempo they do, they might need to drag a couple of big forwards off the bench. But, Dupont, having to move out of 9. What
an odd move. What an odd move. Keep him at 9.
Well, I can't remember who else they had hanging around on the bench, but it was, they obviously thought that was the way forward. The scrum half, none of us knew, made a couple of early mistakes, which cost points. But as soon as I think Dupont's an extraordinary player, as we keep on saying, but as soon as you took him out of that optimum position because of the 6-2 split on the bench, that can be the only reason. And it'll be interesting to see if La Rochelle take the same risk against Leinster, because if they get an injury in the wrong place, that could really stuff them.
Stephen, did the Leinster we saw, obviously, well, we previewed this last week. And first of all, we were saying it's going to be an absolute classic, closer than last year, and it potentially didn't necessarily live up to that bill. But part of the reason it didn't is, 1, Toulouse in ill discipline, but 2, Leinster's defence. You obviously look at the stats and you wouldn't think that it was a Leinster 20-point win. Is that all the more reason for Leinster not to fear La Rochelle, given that they've dealt with a pack every bit as fit, and the Skeltons, the Aldrits, the Bottiers, the Donties, if they're fit, aren't necessarily to be feared?
I think La Rochelle are a differently coached team. I think they will pose different threats to this Leinster side. Yes, they have the size, the power, the athleticism in some of their players, but I think they're better coached. You look, everybody talked about before the game how good that Toulouse are in the transition from turnover ball, and they can cut you to ribbons. It was actually the other way around, where when the first few minutes of the game, Toulouse were hammering their line, turnover, whole length of the pitch. Ross Byrne knocks over a penalty, 3-0. A couple of minutes later, hammering the ground, turnover, nearly a length of the pitch. Was it 6-0? And then, or whatever it was. And when Toulouse made a mistake, it seemed to be a big mistake that cost them. And I think, yes, La Rochelle will make a number of mistakes in the game, but they won't be glaringly obvious, like Ramos getting yellow carded and Leinster scoring 3 tries, whatever it was, when he was off. And the same with Nettie or whoever it was to get yellow carded and scoring another try. I just don't think Ronan O'Gara's side will do that. I just think they will back their drift defence. They will use the touchline. They will, retreat when they need to, get into scramble mode, go out and make the big hits. And then when they have the ball, be a bit more. I think Toulouse, I don't know what you guys think, but I wasn't impressed with Toulouse at all. I'm not sure if it was the occasion or what it was, but like when I was looking through their pack, I was going, geez, they have some quality operators here. They're going to turn it on. Like the bookmakers or something had it like 10 points, and I was like, no way, this game's going to be really tight. And for me, I thought Leinster could have won by more.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I thought that one of the areas which was a clear clean out for Leinster was the back row. Doris and Van der Fleer and Conan. They were all outstanding, and they hustled that Toulouse back row out of the game. Willis played quite well, but Cross and Flamont, two French internationals, barely showed in the game. And the bench thing was it's always a gamble, 6-2, and it backfired this time. But the scrum half who came on, Grau, looked very, very nervous. He made some really bad mistakes, and they also, their discipline. The Ramos, handout was gratuitous, really, and I'm not sure that they didn't have it covered. So that cost them dearly. And then the Nettie thing was a bit of an odd one, but the one thing that you say about Leinster is you give them an opportunity. They kicked it to the corner and they scored with ease.
I think the warning signs were there.
Toulouse are an elite side, and they shouldn't be thinking like this. But it seemed to me that as soon as Dupont was not doing what he does every week for them, that they were adrift. They were a bit all at sea, really. I don't think they adjusted to that substitution very well at all. And it's understandable if you've got a player who's absolutely the definition of world class, and you never see the bloke play poorly, and we all know how much the French in general, how much importance they invest in the scrum half. Everything comes off the scrum half, and it has done for donkey's years. There aren't that many famous French outside halves. There are as many famous French scrum halves as you can shake a stick at. They depend on him enormously, and why wouldn't you? A player of that standard, but he's not exerting the same kind of control where he ended up as a sort of floating 10. As he does at 9, when he's absolutely at the heart of it, and he's running all those flanker support angles off the base and all that kind of stuff, and that all went, and they couldn't adjust.
And the other factor is, Tamak isn't a good 12. So what you end up with is a 9, young, inexperienced 9 who looked out of his league. I thought you've got the world class 9 who's a very good 10, but he's not getting involved with the game like he should because he's not right there at the coalface, and you've got a world class 10. Playing pretty averagely at 12. So the whole thing just diminished immediately. They made that change. But I think the warning signs were there in the quarterfinal. Sharks outplayed Toulouse in the first half, down in Toulouse, and it required, a sort of performance from the ages from Toulouse to rescue themselves in the second half in the sun with the home crowd. And I don't care who you are, you can't keep on doing that kind of stuff. We get used to it, but you can't go to the well endlessly, and it just wasn't there for Toulouse. It just wasn't there on the day.
No, it wasn't. It's almost like you look at, if you put Gibson Park at 10, and then you put Ross Byrne at 12, and you went, well, away you go, lads, play against, you know, the Toulouse team in a Heineken Champions Cup semi-final. You can be damn sure that they wouldn't function as well. And that's exactly what it looked like. I totally agree with you. I thought Toulouse in the opening 10 minutes, actually, I went, geez, they've got a bit of purpose about them here. You know, Dupont was running the back against the green, a couple of nice fends, a couple of offloads. Aldegari was getting into the game and, you know, running hard lines. I think it was Willis before their try with, you know, broke off the tackle and Gaddy and got in and then set up to get in the corner. I was like, geez, a bit of purpose about them. The ball's being zipped. And then all of a sudden, Dupont went to 10, and I heard Dricko chatting about the ruck speed, and I totally agree with you. I think the back row had an absolute field day for Leinster. The ruck speed was absolutely ridiculous, and you can't, as you rightly said, you know, keep going on in that fashion in that way and expect to, you know, have a miracle final 20 minutes and get a result, especially against a team like Leinster.
Yeah.
Stephen, before you go, I know you need to go. I've just got one more question for you, and that's Jack Conan, because he was obviously British Lion back in 21. He was the Ireland 8 shirt holder, and then Caelan Doris came along, and that now no longer seems to be the case. But what do you make of his response to that in the past 12 months? And do you think with the performances he put in the Six Nations and for Leinster since, he's now pushing for a starting back row spot? And I guess if the World Cup final was tomorrow, what would your Irish back row be?
Yeah, I was really impressed with them yesterday. I have been impressed with them for the last couple of months. And again, was there a loss of form? I don't think there was. I just think Pete O'Mahony sort of found a bit of form, and because of his line-out prowess and how good he is defensively as well, he's so good at, you know, over the ball turnovers, where Jack sort of gives you something a little bit different. The problem that Andy Farrell has is that Caelan Doris seems to play a hell of a lot better with the number 8 jersey on his back for Ireland than he does with the number 6 jersey. And there's no doubt when Caelan Doris is playing to the best of his ability and Jack Conan's playing to the best of his ability, like Caelan Doris is marginally better at the current time. So do you try and get both of them onto the pitch and you know have the conversation that, you know, guys, your roles, like I played number 8 the whole way through under schools, the whole way through to international rugby, but I couldn't get in ahead of Jamie Heaslip, so I had to shift myself to number 6 role, which then I really enjoyed and started to flourish in and learned more about the role and what it entailed, and maybe that's, you know, there's going to have to be a bit of a gentleman's agreement between Jack Conan and Caelan Doris to make sure that they both are on the pitch, because they are ridiculous athletes. Like Jack Conan is a huge man, huge, massive. When you're playing against South Africa in a World Cup quarter-final in France, I think I would prefer to have him starting in a back row just to give you that little bit more of an oomph. So, yeah, this is the thing though. He has to keep it going now. You know, Jack has to be one of the best players in the pitch in the URC quarter or semi-final and final and in the Champions Cup final. He has to be doing that, because if he has one bad game, then all of a sudden Andy Farrell's going, right, well, played brilliant one week, dropped off the next. But you don't get that with Caelan Doris. You do not get that with Josh van der Fleer. And consistently over the last couple of years in the big games, you don't get that with Peter either. So, you know, this is a challenge for you know, Jack Conan, that he's able to mix it for, you know, the business end of the season here and show that he is a world-class British and Irish Lions starting number 8, like you said.
And what happens, Stephen, if Ryan Baird continues to go like that and Andy Farrell suddenly thinks, well, I wouldn't mind him and Tyburn in the same pack?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Ryan Bair's really raw. I think he sort of runs around with his hair on fire sometimes. And an old Eddie O'Sullivan quote, you know, that, you know, you do your specific role and do it really well. And, you know, when you get the opportunity to light somebody up, or you get the opportunity to run through somebody or give that offload, that you make it happen. And if you watch a lot of the games, Ryan Baird fizzles out. especially in the last half an hour of games, he fizzles out. And that's why he's a good bench player as well, to come on and really have an impact, because he is, he is the definition of fast twitch fiber, athlete. He has it in abundance. So a lot of the games you'll see him have a cracking opening 20 minutes, and then he sort of just fades out of the game. And as you guys know, at international rugby, that can't be happening. But he's a young guy. And he's he can put a hell of a lot more muscle onto that frame as well, and learn a lot. So yeah, Ryan Baird will certainly, hopefully, be in the World Cup squad, but I'm not sure he'll be in that starting berth just yet.
Stephen, I'll let you go. Can I just get a Champions Cup final winner from you, please?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with Leinster. If it wasn't in the Aviva Stadium, I probably would go La Rochelle. But I think just the home advantage, the run-in that they've had, last 16, quarterfinal, semi-final, final. Johnny Sexton's obviously not going to play another game for Leinster. It'd be great for him to share holding the lifting the cup. And I think overall this season, I know La Rochelle and Ronan O'Gara might disagree. They might just deserve it, in my opinion. But we'll wait and see. And it's a final any given day. But yeah, fingers crossed Leinster can do it and keep Irish rugby on a bit of a high leading towards this Rugby World Cup.
Awesome. Chaps, I'll get your predictions a couple of weeks later, because it is a while away and we've fallen foul of early predictions beforehand. Stephen, I'll let you go. That was great.
Thanks, guys.
So much for joining us.
Thanks, big fella.
No worries. Cheers, Nick.
Thanks
Cheers,
very
Chris.
much.
Cheers,
Good
Brendan.
to see
Thanks,
you.
Ollie.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe through our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.